is Lauren Deitch, and I work in the programming department at AICHE. I'm here with Joe Porcelli, who is a consultant for AICHE working on a project with the educational program for the Northeast Regional Conference at the Chem Show. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
So tell us, how did the educational program for the Chem Show evolve into the Northeast Regional Conference at the Chem Show?
Okay. Well, I've worked with Joe Kramer for many years, and he's had this dream of starting a Northeast Regional Conference. But the problems of starting a new conference in a new area are tough because the finances can be very, very difficult when it's freestanding. Now, what I understand, and again, I'm new into the Chem Show activity. 2 years ago, at the Chem Show, there was an educational program which consisted of tutorials on various technical subjects, and there was 1 day of programming by AICHE called AICHE Day. And so Joe had the idea that that one didn't go so well because it was chopped up in pieces, different people doing programming for different segments. And he felt that if the entire educational program, which is 2.5 days and 5 or 6 tracks per day, could be programmed by one entity, AICHE, we'd have a much more coherent program and hopefully much higher attendance than the previous year, 2 years ago. So Joe had this idea then, why not tack on this as the Northeast Regional Conference, so that he would get his programming in the Northeast, but it was in conjunction with the Chem Show, so there were cost sharing that made it much more beneficial. And that's really how it started.
Why did AICHE choose you to take a major role in organizing this event?
Well, I've been a member for over 50 years. I'm an emeritus member, but I have to admit that most of those years I was pretty inactive. But probably in the late 90s or mid-90s, I got active in the management division of AICHE. I also ended up being on the board for 1 term, about 3 years. And I got to know Joe Kramer very well, and one of the new programs that Joe was trying to start was a management conference with the concept of attracting higher level members of the industry to come to AICHE functions. And so I worked on the committee for the first few management conferences, and then I managed a couple of the steering committees of management conferences after that. So I had quite a bit of experience working on these conferences and working with Joe. And then this year, I was working with him on a volunteer basis on a Hong Kong conference, which never happened. And then I was introduced to the idea that Joe felt, number one, he was trying to retire this year. He was going to be passing the baton on to someone else. And he thought that programming the educational program as an entity would be very, very much up my alley. And so he hired me on a very part-time basis to manage putting this program together.
What are some of the presentations that you think will be of the greatest interest to attendees?
Okay, this is a difficult one to answer because, number one, let's go back. The Chem Show is an exhibit. I think most people who will see this will know that exhibit with equipment, and it tends to attract the operating chemical engineers and other operating people, maintenance people, construction people around the chemical industry. But because it takes place in New York City, it's drawing from those process industries that are near the Northeast. And so these are not the big petrochemical companies or the big oil companies. These are the smaller companies that work in food, they work in pharmaceuticals, they work in materials, all these smaller businesses. And they send their operating people to the Chem Show to look at equipment and to learn more about it. And some of the tutorials are actually put on for us by representatives from some of the companies that exhibit. So you have one kind of audience, but we're also trying to make this the Northeast Regional Conference of AICHE, so we're trying to attract the kind of people that usually come to AICHE meetings, which is a different thing. So we've programmed really quite a few different kinds of activities to try to attract them all. Now, as far as what's particularly interesting, now I have come to Chem Shows through my life, but I've never gone to an educational program at the Chem Show, and I never really paid much attention to them. I hope that we will be solving that between our marketing and our programming this time, so that people like me will be interested. But there are some things, there are things being put on by pump manufacturers, by filtration. There's a company that builds special heat exchangers, falling film, white film evaporator kind of exchangers, special, very technical type of equipment. And so some of those will be very interesting to some people. If I had my freedom to wander around and attend, there were a couple of those I probably would want to attend. But we also have some programming. First of all, there's a large segment of programming. It's 5 sessions over 2.5 days on nanotechnology. And it's very, very thorough. And that's the kind of thing that someone would come and probably not see. They'd go see the Chem Show, but they probably would not see any other programming besides the nanotechnology, because it's really fills up the 2.5 days. In the tutorials, which are the second segment of our programming, there are actually 17 of them. That we have some that are the same as they were 2 years ago, but with updates. There are some that are expanded into 2 sessions from 1 with much more material. There are some on solid-liquid separations. There's some on very interesting pair on microfiltration and ultrafiltration, which is a very, very important set of technologies for these specialized chemical companies that tend to be in the Northeast. There's one on crystallization, which I understand had attracted a lot of attention 2 years ago, and we're hoping it will get even more attention this time. And the same person who presents that is presenting a totally different one on energy saving in a plant setting, which I would be very interested in sitting in on and seeing what that one's about. There's, I think I mentioned solids handling. There's this filtration. So there's many things for many people, and so our challenge now, we've got a full cast of program, is to sell it. And so I hope that we can do a good job of getting the message out to everyone that there's a lot of things here that are worth seeing. And I should mention the newest add-on is something that we're calling the Energy Safety and Consulting Conference. This is 5 sessions, 2 on energy, 2 on consulting, and 1 on safety, which are aimed at, again, the industry in the Northeast, the smaller companies who cannot afford the very, very large software or programs for safety, the companies who are burdened, as everyone else is, by high energy costs, and we're going to have a session on what can we expect in the future, and another session on what are people doing in way of energy saving in industry today that could be implemented by these smaller companies. The 2 consulting sessions are aimed at large companies have a whole department to find consultants when they have a problem, but we have many smaller consultants in the Northeast, and we have many smaller companies who don't really know how to find a consultant or how to work with one once you have one. So we have 2 half days of programming on that subject as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Joe.
It's my pleasure.
The Northeast Regional Conference at the Chem Show takes place from November 1st through 3rd at the Jacob Javits Center here in New York.